Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week we talk about a different topic to do with work and share ideas and actions so that we can all navigate our squiggly careers with that bit more confidence and control.
And if you haven't already, it is worth signing up for Squiggly Careers in Action. That's our weekly newsletter that comes out every Tuesday. In there, you'll get links to the podcast so you don't miss out, and also lots of other things that you can use for your career learning too. So there are some how-to videos with practical tools and the odd matrix from me. There's Sarah's Borrowed Brilliance with lots of the things that she's been listening and learning to as well. And we also got some of our free toolkits. We will put the link to Squiggly Careers Action in the show notes, or you can go to our website, amazingif.com, and sign up there.
So today we're talking about what skills matter most for your future career, which I feel like is quite a big promise that we might be making.
Do you know, as soon as you said that, I was like, wow, is this going to be one of those podcasts that really dates?
Yeah. Well, I think that's almost the point, and we decided to not be scared of it as a topic, because there is lots of noise and I think lots of pressure to feel like you are learning and reskilling, and there's lots of talk in organisations about the skills that matter. I've seen so many different skills matrices, really long lists of skills that I think can feel quite overwhelming for people. And you're looking at it and going, well, how do I make a decision about which skills to overinvest in? Do I do what my organisation tells me to do? How do I learn these skills? Like, where do I start? So though I do think this will change, this is a dynamic thing, right? You don't do this once and go, well, that's what I'm going to stick to. I do think taking some ownership and being intentional and having some agency over skills as a kind of, for you in your squiggly career, what are the skills that matter most for me, maybe right now? Which are the ones that I really want to invest in? I think that helps you to feel more confident and more in control if you've at least asked yourself some of those questions.
Well, the idea for the episode as well, it came from, we did a survey with our community where we asked them lots of different questions, and I think one of the questions was sort of, what worries have you got about your career at the moment? And lots of people said, you know, I'm either worried about how much I'm going to have to learn and when I'm going to fit it in, or what I need to learn in order to stay relevant. And I was thinking, we often reference the World Economic Forum, which does some research every year on the top career skills that you need to invest in. And I think what's quite daunting is you look at the list, so it's got things like analytical thinking and innovation, complex problem solving, critical thinking, leadership and social influence, technology use, monitoring and control. And I think not only do you look at that and go, gosh, that's a lot, but also if your job is not
does it really involve those things?
Well, if they're the future skills that I'm supposed to develop to stay relevant, and that is not what I do today, then it's a bit, you're like, what happens to me? And so I think we can't just look at a list and go, they're the future skills, I need to invest in them. There's got to be something else that happens between what I do today and where I want to go, and how I use that to prioritise where I'm going to invest my time and develops, which is, I think what we're trying to do here is less about, here are 5 skills that you need to know right now, and more about how do you create a filter for your future career that helps you to stay relevant with your skills? What are the things that will help you regardless of what you do or regardless of where you're investing? So in order to answer that question, we're going to tackle this episode in 2 parts. So part 1 is all about awareness. It is about thinking about 3 different aspects of you and your career that will help you to make a decision about where you develop in. So the first bit's about awareness. I'm going to use Sarah as a bit of a case study / guinea pig for that
skills
bit.
Guinea pig.
Skills guinea pig. That's quite funny. It's going to be my skills guinea pig. And then part 2 is, once you've got that awareness and we've made quite an individualised approach to where you're going to prioritise your time, then it's, well, what do I do? What am I going to do differently as a result of having that awareness? What actions can I take on my own, and what actions could I take with other people so that I'm really investing in those skills that are going to be most important for me? Are you good to be my skills guinea pig?
I'm ready.
So this part 1 bit, this is about looking at yourself and your career through 3 different lenses. So lens 1 is, what skills do you want to invest in for yourself, like your own interests, the things you're passionate about. Lens 2 is more about the work that you do. So what skills are important for the work that you do? Where can you maybe see that some of those skills might be evolving at the moment? And then the third lens is a bit more zoomed out. It's more about the sort of world that you are working in. What what skills are feeling important for that at the moment. And we're going to look at those 3 lenses individually. And that's why I will ask Sarah her questions. And then we're going to see, are there any themes that are coming through that might help you to prioritise where you invest? So let's start with the first lens for you and your learning. You as an individual, and we were thinking about, do we think about Sarah now in the job that you do running Amazing If, or do we go back to Sarah at Sainsbury's, for example? Which Sarah are we talking about?
So I'm actually going to do a hybrid because I think that will be most helpful. It doesn't sound like it will be initially, but I think it will be. So I am going to imagine that I am in Sainsbury's. So this is a supermarket in the UK today.
Okay.
Working in marketing.
Okay, got it.
It's 2025 and I'm in a marketing team working in a big company.
Okay, so the first lens is just you as that Sarah. What skills are you personally interested in investing in?
So I definitely would have had a skills area around creativity. So probably creative thinking, coming up with ideas, coming up with concepts, reviewing creative work, like creating creative work. So there's definitely kind of a creativity skill. So I was very interested in that. And probably the other big one for me would have been, and still is today, developing people. Because even when I wasn't in Amazing If, I was very motivated by leading other people, kind of developing people in my team, mentoring people outside of my team. So I was always really interested in kind of learning and development. So probably creativity and developing people.
I always think this lens is a bit like the selfish skills.
Yeah.
If I get to learn whatever I want to do, I enjoy these. This is what I want to spend time on if I've got complete free reign. Okay, so that's the first lens.
Yeah.
Second lens is the kind of work that you're doing. So if you're Sarah in marketing, what skills are important for you to invest in order for you to sort of be brilliant at that role?
So being strategic. I was always in quite strategic roles, not consistently, but I did a head of marketing strategy role. So and I think every job you need to be strategic to an extent. So being strategic, being analytical, so the ability to sort of evaluate how well is your marketing working, an understanding of things like budgets, probably not super data orientated. I wasn't in super data based jobs, but I think in every job in marketing, you need to understand data well enough to ask questions or kind of evaluate. So it's kind of something around data. And then probably in Sainsbury's, something around like relationships and working cross-functionally. Because it's such a big company, you couldn't get anything done if you just were like, oh, I'm just going to do my own thing without knowing how does this connect to other teams, other parts of that organisation. So not just sort of relationships generally, it was kind of cross-functional relationships going beyond your discipline. Yeah.
So we've got cross-functional relationships.
Yeah.
We've got that sort of data competence.
Yes.
So can I kind of converse with data, and then strategic skills would be important. So let's now do the third lens, which is sort of the world that you are working in. And obviously you've got these lists of skills that come from all kinds of places, but they're not all necessarily sort of relevant to the world that you work in. But if you were to zoom out a little bit, so bigger than Sarah, bigger than Sainsbury's, that kind of next lens that we're looking at, what skills feel important for the world that you're working in?
So I think it is hard to ignore AI, and it's inevitable, and I know it gets a bit, on repeat because everybody's talking about it. And I'm sure actually if I was in Sainsbury's today, it would also matter in Sainsbury's. Yeah. But generally, I think it's one of those things where you've got to figure out, well, what does AI mean to me in the industry that I'm in? Is it about being more effective, more making my life easier? So there would definitely need to be something about AI. I think analytical skills generally, so probably a bit connected to what I was talking about in terms of like understanding kind of budgets and numbers, but perhaps a bit beyond that. And I think the world still needs creative thinking, or whether I hope that that's true. I don't know whether the world needs it or whether it does always come up in the World Economic Forum list, like top 10. People often describe it as, it's something uniquely human, like the way that our brains work. Albeit I would say I have seen AI come up with some good ideas and do quite a good job of some creative thinking. So I think the world needs that. And generally, if I even reflect on what we both do, I don't think there's a job that I've been in where relationships haven't mattered, because even when you're working on things that feel very solo endeavours, even when we're doing stuff that's very head down, like writing a book, which in some ways doesn't really involve, there's a moment with a book, it doesn't involve anyone else other than us two. But then actually it takes so many relationships to make that work. And actually it goes way beyond the two of us.
It's sort of like it's more than cross-functional, it's sort of cross-company,
yeah,
isn't it? You've got so many people that are involved in books.
And so I feel like something beyond kind of cross-functional relationships from a Sainsbury's perspective, but more about just that ability to build relationships. I feel like it's how you discover new opportunities. I feel like it creates possibilities. It's how you make stuff happen. I think if you don't have that as a skill, I feel like with every job I've done, I don't think I would have achieved the impact of all the things that I feel proudest of when I kind of look back at them. So there's some of the territories, I think.
So the idea of doing this is you end up with sort of 3 skill circles. So Sarah's got a skill circle for things that she's sort of selfishly interested in developing, skill circle for what's important for the work, and then what's important for the world that you work in. And you're looking for a couple of things here. So first of all, there might be some obvious consistencies across the circles. So relationships came up a few times. Also, the analytical thing, slightly different in the work and the world, but it came up twice. And then I also think you can maybe join the dots across skills. So for example, you talked about thing that I'm like interested in is sort of creating creativity, and then you talked about in the world with AI, but I think you can join some dots there and say, well, how can I use AI to help me to become even
almost
more
like
creative?
skill stacking.
And you can't sort of see where the similarities are or spot where you can join the dots until you've created those skill circles. But I do think it helps to make things more individual, because when people go on all the time about, we need to know more about AI, it's actually really big. It's really big. It's a bit like, I need to be better at leadership. You're like, okay, we should probably unpack that a little bit. And I think what this helps you to do is say, well, yes, it is important, but why might it be important to me? And you can sort of connect those a little bit. So creating the skill circles helps you to be more self-aware about what's important to you. And that means you can prioritize. So just if you were to pick 3, for example, across all the things, I think you probably mentioned about 9 different skills as you were going through that.
Yeah.
If you were to pick 3 that feel most important to you based on what we talked about, what do you think you would prioritize?
I would prioritize creative thinking. I think I'll call it that for now. I would prioritize relationships. Yeah. Kind of maybe like creating connections is how I would actually describe that. And probably maybe something around how I can connect AI to lots of other skills, almost to your description, because I think it is definitely one of those areas where you don't want to get left behind. And it's only going to become I think it's just going to become part of how we all do our jobs. So I sort of, to your point, don't really want to see it as a separate skill, because I think that might miss the point for me, because I'm not in a AI-based job. I don't want to build loads of AIs. I wouldn't mind having a go and see what I could create. But I think I'd always want to be using it kind of with as like an rather than a kind of by itself, maybe.
So sort of like AI to amplify my impact, the creating and the connections, and then the creativity in my role.
I think so.
And again, that doesn't have to be forever, but doing that first process, I think, helps you to just get to that clarity about these are the skills that are most important for the future that I can see for me right now. And that's going to constantly change. So once you've got to that point by doing the skill circles, the next thing is, well, what am I going to do about it? If that's the priority for me, how am I going to invest in those skills so they stand out and become a bigger part of the work that I do?
So the first action we're going to talk about here is then, how do you make those skills stronger? So we want to over-invest in those skills that feel important to you, that you've been intentional about making a choice to say, these matter to me, and they probably matter to your work and to the world, at least to some extent, because that's a smart choice to make. And I think a good place to start is often, who is already good at this, or great at this, probably actually a better question, that I can learn from. So this is not about comparing ourselves, because I think sometimes you might have a skill, say like creative thinking, then you might look at someone who's amazing at this and just be like, well, that can be daunting. Like, that sort of expert from a distance, and you're like, well, I'm never going to be that. So why should I bother? And I can imagine opting out of a skill too soon because of that. So if I follow John Hegarty on LinkedIn. Now, John Hegarty is one of the original founders of a creative agency called BBH, who made loads of really famous ads and continue to make lots of famous ads, but like the Levi's adverts, the Audi adverts. And he's obviously discovered LinkedIn, I think, in the last few years. And but his posts are really interesting on creativity and creative thinking. I read one over the weekend on Nike and what they've been doing and maybe how they've lost some of their creative spirit, but what it looks like to rediscover it. And he does such thoughtful kind of analysis about kind of creativity. And I think you've got two choices. You could either go, I am never going to be that. I'm never going to be as good at that. And so that's not a skill for me. Or you can just learn from it. And I think that's what I find really useful, is almost having a community of people, you know, because there's so much out there, so much volume, there's so much content now, that I'm like, you've got to be really selective about who are you learning from. Doesn't mean you don't need to mix it up every so often, because obviously you can get stuck in a bit of an echo chamber trap. But the advantage now, I think, is that you don't need to know these people.
Yes.
I don't know John Hegarty. I do know Margaret Heffernan a bit, but she's got some new work out on uncertainty and creativity, and how the most creative people are often so brilliant at navigating uncertainty. And so I already know I will dive deep into that.
Yeah.
Because I know she's brilliant. And again, if I compared myself to her, I'm like, well, obviously I'm never going to be her, but then you can still be a better version of you. So I think that's often my starting point, is once I've got that skill, surrounding myself with people who are brilliant and exceptional, and usually who I don't know. And then I'm like, right, make an effort, read their newsletters, read their books, go to their events.
Yeah, and you pick up lots of different ideas, and it just inspires you. I think that ideas and that inspiration is kind of that first bit that you're trying to sort of almost curate for yourself. And then once you've got that, you can think, well, how do I then make these stronger? So I'm getting more awareness of other people that do this well. So kind of what am I going to do differently in my day? And this is where we often talk about sort of stretching your strengths in the job that you do. So could it be in the meetings that you are in, or the conversations that you're having, or the projects that you're in, that you could just show up with that strength slightly more? I always think that the more you use a strength, the more people and the more situations, the bigger and the better it becomes. Because if I take a skill like career development, when I was just doing that in my job as a manager, I was getting like incrementally better at it because my teams were getting slightly bigger. But it wasn't until I started doing career development for people outside of the company that I worked for, or we started doing it together by running sessions, or even then thinking about, well, what would this sound like on a podcast? You know, when you're using that skill with different people in different situations, it just gets bigger and it gets better. And so what you are looking to do is to think about, well, how can I stretch that in the job I do today? Can I use it more in the department? Can I look for some initiatives in the company? Can I use it outside of work? Like, the more you can stretch the strength, the bigger and the better it'll become. And a lot of that is in your ownership. And the trick here, I always think the trick with stretching a strength, is you want to create pull for the strength. So I could say to Sarah, oh, I want to use my creative thinking skill a bit more. What can I do? And that's me sort of pushing it onto Sarah. I sort of push the problem onto her to solve. Whereas if I said, oh, it feels a bit like some of our kind of projects are stalling a little bit, they could do with some kind of fresh thought to re-energise everyone. One of the things that I really love is kind of practicing creative thinking. Would it be helpful if I ran a bit of a workshop to get a bit more energy, a few more ideas into the team to create a bit more momentum? And I mean, this is a fake example, but Sarah's already sort of nodding, because it makes sense. I've solved a problem. I've created a bit more of a pull for that strength from Sarah rather than pushing it on. It's the best way for other people to buy into you using those strengths more.
I think a really practical thing that you could do, because I was just thinking as you were talking then, is you could look across your diary for a week and what you are already doing. So this is a kind of an add-in rather than an add-on, which is always a good thing, because it's hard enough as it is, to do these things. So if we can add it into what we're already doing, that's always a kind of bonus or a bit of a win. And I was thinking about the rest of my week, and I can already identify one thing I've got coming up this week. So I don't think it needs to be loads. One thing I've got coming up where I could choose to use creative thinking to make that different to probably what I would have done anyway. So I'm going to spend some time this week with some teams, asking them a bit about like how work's feeling for them, just so that we can get a sense of like how else we can be helpful with the work we do for Squiggly Careers. And so typical approach to that is I could have turned up to those conversations, a few questions prepared, fine. That's all I probably would have done. If I then go, okay, but I want to get better at creative thinking as a skill, that's not a very creative approach. That's a sort of very standard approach. So then I was starting to kind of muse over, okay, well, what are the tools, the techniques? How could I approach that differently? So it's sort of more creative for me, but also more creative for those people I'll be meeting too. So could I, for example, do you remember the eights model?
Oh, where crazy eights.
Yeah, you get a blank piece of paper, you get everybody to fold it into kind of 8, and you get people, you set a brief, and you get people to write down 8 things. So what I could do, I was thinking, is I could maybe get people to do, what does a standard day look like for them at the moment, and then design your perfect day. 8 things, what 8 things would happen in your perfect day at work?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But already I was like, well, that feels more interesting than me just sitting doing a very standard focus group where I sort of ask a question and it's all a bit awkward with people answering questions. But that doesn't take too much. It's a bit more thought, and I have to be intentional, and I do have to take some initiative. But it's happening anyway, so why wouldn't I try to get better at that skill kind of in that moment?
Yeah, so good thing, scan the week, spot at least one moment where you can stretch the strength you want to be known for, and all of that is very often in your control. It's just about being intentional. And the second action is to think about how you can develop together. So that first one was all about what can you do, what's in your control. The second thing really about is how do you increase your impact by doing this with other people and developing together. So we've got 3 quick ideas that you can take here so that you can take that skilled thing you want to be known for, you can make it stand out more by doing it with other people.
So the first one is Skill Snap. And Skill Snap, as the name suggests, is finding someone else who's got the same skill that they want to invest in and make stronger. So I really like the idea of skills sharing generally in a team. So if you imagine now you've got a team of 8 to 10 people and we all just picked 2. We were like, right, what are 2 skills that matter to you in 2025? So I might say creative thinking and adding AI into the work that I already do, using that as a skill. Then if I hear everybody else's, somebody else says a version of creative thinking or developing ideas, we've got a snap. Always more fun and easier to learn together than it is to learn alone. You probably want to do some things by yourself, but I think we know that learning lasts and it's often kind of stickier when you're sort of sharing it with someone. So then if Helen and I both said creative thinking, I might have some ideas for Helen might have some ideas for me. Even if we were like, we're going to meet up.
I feel like I want a sound effect. Can I?
Why?
Have a snap?
Oh, you want a...
Yeah.
You want a...
No, that's
snap?
right. You're going to clap my hand. She's such
There
a
you go.
reluctant snapper.
I did. You wanted me to... You're like, I was like, oh, God, that was scarily close to a high five. And I think
it was a low.
It was a low five. The day we high five is the day I walk away, I think.
Okay.
Just
Noted.
FYI.
Noted.
Well, but I do high five my 8-year-old sometimes, but I think you've got to be under 11 for that to
You're
work.
a poor child when they're like 12 and they go for a high five. You're like, it's
Handshake.
over. It's over.
Yeah. But I do think if you found someone, you've also got that accountability partner.
Yes.
You know, being like, we are both committing to this. And so, if I didn't do that thing that I just described to you, which I actually genuinely am going to do this week, you're probably going to say to me, how did that go?
Yeah.
And so if I now don't do it, I'll feel bad and I'll feel a bit lazy or like I'm not sort of doing the thing that I said I was going to do. And so I think sometimes just having that kind of sharing, that snap with someone, and it doesn't have to be in your team. I think it could be someone in a network in a company, could be someone in a different team, could be somebody in kind of in an industry. Like I'm part of some WhatsApp groups, whereas I think if you did this in a WhatsApp group, it would work brilliantly.
Yes,
like a really easy way.
I can imagine people doing like the emoji, like you put it down and like give me an emoji if
some
this
sort
is
of
the
card. Playing card?
Yeah.
Snap?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe.
Sure. We could play with it. Maybe we could do it on our Pod Plus WhatsApp group. But yeah, I think finding a skill snap is just a nice way to kind of buddy up your development. And so the second idea of developing together is to do a skill swap. So this idea is where, again, team environment, you share things that you want to develop in. But if somebody already has that ability that you could sort of borrow from, you could swap it with each other. So let's say that I've already been playing with AI and how it can help me do my job better. I could say, well, why don't I spend some time with you, Sarah, and share what I have been doing well and see how it could work for you. And equally, if Sarah had some skills that were useful for me based on what I wanted to develop, you're sort of swapping that with each other. And I like it because I think that is just a very realistic way of learning, because you're going to be giving me tried and tested stuff rather than me sort of reading about it in a book. And maybe it might be interesting, but it might not really work for my context. I think skill swapping, you get much more kind of relevant learning that way.
And it's just really practical, isn't it? You know, like somebody might just be like, well, a skill that they want to be amazing at is, you know, like they're great at data analysis. And someone described to me actually how you can use AI for data analysis. And they did a bit of a how-to video. And, you know, like it blows your mind. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. But someone just sitting down with you for half an hour, you know, with like a screen and just being like, well, you do this. You don't need to get brilliant at that. You're not going to be as good as they are. But you've like nudged forward that skill a bit. Like, I don't want to be known for my data analysis, but do I want to be good enough at that skill? Yes. So if someone can do a bit of a skill swap with me, I just go, oh, it's an easy way for me to get better. Probably that feels very relevant to my context. Because if they're in the same team or the same company, they're probably using it in a way that I understand. Versus compared to, you know, when we talked about like borrowing brilliance from people you don't know,
it can be
that's
a bit
quite
removed.
far away. It's quite removed, whereas this is very relevant.
I suppose that one can also be a bit aspirational. You know, that point is ideas and inspiration, but it's not always immediately applicable.
I'm probably not going to be making a TV ad for Levi's anytime soon.
I mean, who knows?
You never know.
Who knows? Who knows? And the third one then is the idea of finding a skills sponsor. So this is where you share the skill that you want to develop with somebody, and sponsors are often people who've got sort of access and influence. So the idea here of having a skills sponsor is you are going to have the ability to sort of challenge me with my skill. So, you know, I want to be known for being a brilliant presenter. Like, I really want to know that. And so as my skills sponsor, I'm sort of giving you the authority to give me feedback, for example. You're sort of bought into me and my ability, and you want to see it get better. So you're giving me feedback. You might be spotting opportunities for me. You want to do well. And you're also the sort of person who's brave enough to let me know where I could be better.
I think it's both challenge and champion.
Yes,
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that.
Because the challenge is the feedback. The challenge can also be, you know, like constructive. Have you thought about, or this could be a good idea to get better at that skill? And the championing can be, oh, did you know that this project is coming up? That would be a good opportunity for you to use that skill. It could be about connection. Sponsors often can make really good connections. Oh, have you spoken to this team or that person? They could help you with that skill. And we were talking about often the idea of sponsorship feels quite intimidating.
Yeah, and vague sometimes.
Yeah, like, oh, I need a sponsor for my career. Can feel like quite a big ask of someone, and you don't really ever ask for a sponsor anyway. Often sponsorship is sort of earned over time. But I do think you could ask for a skills sponsor. Yeah. It's a much easier ask, and it's a bit smaller, because you're essentially saying to somebody, I want to invest in this skill. Not necessarily because you're not very good at it. You're just like, it's something probably you want to be known for, but you see them as someone you can learn from and learn with. So it's quite a nice ask, isn't it? Because it's quite flattering.
I'd be quite proud. Like, if someone said, I'd like you to be my skill sponsor over the next 6 months, I'd be like, yes, that's quite a nice role for me to play. I feel like I want you to do well. I want to do that.
I was just thinking, if someone said to me, because I often talk in workshops about, you know, I like creative thinking and I like idea generation. If someone had said to me in our team, not that they ever have, but if they did,
they might do now.
Let's imagine, oh, I want to get better at thinking creatively. Can you be my skills sponsor for that? I think I'd take it really seriously, but I think also obviously I would get better at that skill because I would be thinking, so what do I do that I can share usefully? What can I involve that person in? It would probably also challenge me to go further and faster, because I would want to make sure that I was really supporting that person. So I reckon everybody wins with that.
I might write a LinkedIn post about how to be a skill sponsor. So as well as listening to this, people can proactively do it. So that's everything that we were going to talk about today. What we will do, because we've talked about a few different ideas, some for you to do on your own, some for you to do other people, we will summarise all of this in the pod sheet, which is a 1-page summary that we create. You can get to it if you go to our website, amazingif.com, and it will just help you to work through both that first bit on awareness, where we talked about the skill circles, and then the second bit around action that you're going to do on your own and with other people.
But that's everything for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back with you again soon. Bye for now.